Okay, so today let's talk about some pretty wild rumors that they're going to bring back the Harley Davidson V-Rod. Bear with the wind, you can probably see my beard moving around, but they're going to bring back the Harley Davidson V-Rod according to all this stuff on the internet. So let's take a look at this from a perspective that it might actually be true. So welcome to today's video. Thank you for watching in advance. It is going to be a little bit long. We're going to start out with all the stuff you want to know, and then we're going to get into the history of the V-Rod, and then at the end I'm going to talk to you about what my plans are regarding this. So I look forward to having this video with you. So, are they really going to do it? Are they going to build the V-Rod? I don't know. It looks like it's actually pretty likely. However, time will tell. Let's take a look in here and see what we can suss out from these pictures. So this video is going to be a little bit long. We are going to take a look at the recent leaks of the 2025 V-Rod that's all over YouTube and the internet right now, and try to determine if they're real. This video is going to discuss everything that you need to know. Now, I don't want you to have to hang around for the stuff that you don't want to follow. So I put it in order, and here are the main topics that we're going to discuss. What do we think we know so far? So what's out there? Why would they do this bike is going to be part 2. Part 3 is, have they tried to fill this space, this space before, and what were the results? Part 5, 1, 2, 3. Part 4 is going to be a quick, or not, history of the V-Rod and its various models. And then finally, the very last chapter is going to be, should I wait for this bike? So let's get into it. So part 1. What do we think we know so far? Well, there's a bunch that we can deduce from the pictures that we found here on the internet. Let's start with the engine. So the original V-Rod had an engine that was co-developed with Porsche, and the name of this was the Revolution engine. It was water-cooled, to the horror of many old-school Harley riders, and it was designed to go into a bike that would compete with the best that Europe and Asia had to offer. Harley has recently launched a growing number of modernized bikes with water-cooled engines being dubbed the Revolution Max. The original output in the V-Rod was approximately 125 horsepower and 85 pounds of torque, depending, of course, on which model. And all this came out of a 1247cc engine. The new engine comes in a couple flavors. The first is a 975cc with outputs of 91 horsepower and 72 foot-pounds of torque. Version 2 is the 1250cc, putting in a 121 horsepower and 93 foot-pounds of torque. And then the last version is another 1250cc with 150 horsepower and 95 foot-pounds of torque. It seems like they're setting the stage because they're taking off right from the range of output that the V-Rod stopped at. So this is a good sign. Now, as we take a look at this picture here, you'll see that this certainly does appear to be a 1250cc Revolution Max engine in these leaked renderings or concept art. Ideally, they're going to have to tune this engine to produce 163 horsepower and 145 foot-pounds of torque at about 5,500 RPMs to take the throne of the muscle bikes. Just to be competitive, based on what's out there right now, they're going to have to produce a minimum, bare minimum of 150 horsepower and 130 foot-pounds of torque coming in at 3,800 RPMs. And they're nearly there, folks. With what they've done on the Pan America, they're not too far off these numbers. Now, looking at the image on the other side of the bike, a couple things that we can see here. Primarily, the big thing is that they're going to keep that belt drive. The competition that this bike competes against, or would compete against, are all either chain driven or shaft driven, and a belt gives you a much smoother application. It's lower in maintenance. It's safer. It just wins all the way around if they can keep the belt able to handle the amount of power that this bike's going to put out. So that's the question, is how are they going to do this? Our next shot is going to show us the large radiator that it's going to need if Harley's going to hit the output numbers that's required for this bike to be competitive. This is a very realistic design here. Also, the large tires are a sign that these concept pictures are on the right track. We will talk about tire size later. Needless to say, you're going to need a large contact patch to control this bike with the power that it's going to put down. This is more concept art. And here in this picture, you see the possibility of a chain drive, which is indicated by that drive belt cover, or I'm sorry, the drivetrain chain cover. This, however, is unlikely. It's not a move that I would expect Harley to make. The seats that have been shown in both this version and the previous version are very similar to the seats of the original V-Rod or the almost recent or almost current Fat Bob, with lots of lumbar support. So I would expect that to be carried over like these concepts show. Let's take a look at some of the competition. It is important to note, however, that with the exception of this video that you're listening to now, everything out there appears to be AI generated, from the concept pictures all the way to the videos that are currently out there at the time of this recording. Part 2. Would they really do this bike? Well, let's take a look at a couple things on here. Let's start with the actual competition. So everybody is involved in the muscle game these days, it seems like. The competitors are selling so good that the companies that have left the game are rumored to be coming back in. That's an example. The Honda Valkyrie and the Yamaha VMAX both are rumored to be in production and design stages, or design and production stages. The current competitors that are dominating the market are the Ducati Diavolo, the Kawasaki ZH2R, and the biggest competition of all, the Triumph Rocket 3. Now, rumored to be in development, but under wraps, under hush-hush, is both BMW and Indian getting ready to enter into this market. So with all this money in a space that used to be dominated by Harley, you know it's got to hurt them not to have an offering. The FXDR. This was the first successor to the V-Rod in the muscle game, and it quickly failed after just a few years. I attribute this to the awkward airbox design, the huge gap that's between the body and the front wheel, the hard steering dynamics from the super far raked out forks. All of these were culprits when it came to the bad sales numbers. Additionally, the bike had the same engine as many of the other bikes, so it wasn't set apart. What do you think? Simultaneously, they also came out with the Breakout, which was then hyped to be the replacement once the FXDR died. This just was not a valid replacement in consumer opinion. The rake is not as extreme as the FXDR, but the handling was a little bit better, but that's not enough. Discontinued from the USA for the few years that we didn't have it. It's back again with a larger engine, but the rest of the bike is too traditional to gain the support of the muscle bike crowd. Now this leads us to the Fat Bob. Then, in my opinion, this is the closest that Harley has ever come to the V-Rod. The large wheels up front and in rear not only give it a great contact patch for the torque to be effective, but with the smallest rake of all the bikes mentioned, including the V-Rod, this is the best handling of their mid-size bikes. This has been called, even by me, the Corvette of the Harley lineup. It's even has a unique look that really sets it apart from the traditional bike that Harley puts out in the same concept lines as the V-Rod. It's got character. It's got those swept up pipes on it. It's got that incredibly unique front end and the headlights. This bike is amazing, and I tell you, I really loved my ownership of my Fat Bob. Why has it been discontinued? The main reason, I feel, is that the range was extremely limited by a tiny fuel tank. It just made it unpractical. The other bike that had a 3-gallon gas tank, there were a few, they're all lighter, and they had decent range. But you had to be aware of your fuel when you were riding this bike. And I think that that's probably what led to it being finally discontinued last year in 2023. So now what? Well, let's take a quick look at the history of the V-Rod and its various models. As we go through these bikes, I'm going to try to limit it to any specific model changes so we don't get this long video already to be too long and too unbearable. So let's get into it. So let's set the stage. The Harley Davidson VRSC, the V-Twin Racing Street Custom, or V-Rod, is a line of V-twin cruiser motorcycles made by Harley Davidson from 2001 until 2017. The concept was originally launched shown in 1999. They are often called muscle bikes for their relatively high power output. The V-Rods are the first street motorcycles made by Harley Davidson with overhead camshafts and liquid cooling. The frame was hydroformed and the engine was co-developed with Porsche. The bike over the years has made many technological firsts. And this technology has made its way into the rest of the lineup, including styling cues such as exhaust designs, cluster design, airbox design, advanced traction controls, and many other elements. Matter of fact, take a look at some of the competition. I'll give you an example. Go Google what the instrument cluster on a Rocket 3, the newest generation, is, and then compare it to the instrument cluster on this bike, and I think you're going to be shocked. Now, I'm going to try to go through these cards as quickly as possible, so feel free to stop on any particular years that you want to learn more on and read the whole card. In 2001 going through 2002, you had the base V-Rod. This had a fuel tank that was underneath the seat. It was a 1130cc 4-stroke V-twin liquid cooled with fuel injection. It put out about 115 horsepower with a peak torque of 74 foot-pounds. So much better than the bikes at the time, but nowhere near where we are today. Now, in 2002 through 2005, the base V-Rod packed forward-mounted controls, a welded pulled-back handlebar, an aluminum radiator shroud, which was different from the first year. Let's see here, vortex air vents on both sides, custom-made mirrors, a new clock and dual trip meter, and an improved side stand. Power stayed the same. Now in 2005, we got the VRSC-B second generation. Compared to the VRSC-A, this bike had a black finished frame, a two-tone silver and black engine with polished covers, black brake calipers, black shock springs, an adjustable handlebar with the tiny minimalist instrument panel, and black hand controls. Additionally, it featured a custom-styled rearview mirror, billet-shaped turn signals with chrome housings on the front and black on the rear, forward-mounted controls, and an underseat mounted fuel tank, which was, I believe, slightly different from the first generation. In 2006, we start to see some specialized versions of the V-Rod come out above the base model. One of them was the Street Rod, which was a Roadster-inspired member of the series, and it was the first model that featured an inverted front fork made by Showa and the first to use Brembo brakes, which are a staple now for Harley-Davidson. It had the highest seat of any of the models, and the front fork had the greatest lean angle of any of the models, 40 degrees. The bike also came equipped with mid-mount controls if you wanted them. The Harley-Davidson Street Rod took its muscles from an 1130cc engine, and it was pumped up to 120 horsepower and 80 foot-pounds of torque. The front telescopic inverted fork was 43 millimeters, and you had 101 millimeters of wheel travel, and an adjustable dual shock absorbers on the rear with the same travel. You also had the Night Rod, which is one of my favorites. In appearance, Night Rod featured a black frame, two-tone black and chrome engine, the Brembo brakes, the aluminum disc wheels with cut slots, and a colored match cap fairing over the headlight. This bike increased displacement to 1247 cc, producing more power and torque, and it added a slipper clutch and the first optional ABS. It was, let's see here, 120 horsepower and 80 foot-pounds of torque at only 7,000 RPM. Now, in 2007, we get into some really exciting stuff when the VRSC-X came out, the Screaming Eagle version of the V-Rod. Now, there's only 1,400 of these units made, and they are the first to put on that 240 rear tire, had a 19-liter fuel tank, and forward-mounted controls. It had a tinted visor on the front instead of that black cowling, and it still kept that 1247 cc engine, but it was putting out 124 horsepower and 86 foot-pounds of torque in this liquid-cooled Revolution engine. The front fork increased in size to 49 millimeters, but it kept the 100 millimeter wheel travel. Now, the Night Rod Special also comes out in 2007, and this is just a freaking awesome bike. It was the first bike, or one of the first bikes in the Harley-Davidson Dark Custom Series. It set the standard with the 240 millimeter rear tire in width. Everything was blacked out on here except for the exhaust. Now I want you to look at that exhaust and tell me that you don't see Fat Bob when you see this exhaust. It is a clear reference to this bike. The engine stayed the same at 1247, 125 horsepower, but now you were at 85 foot-pounds of torque at 7,000 RPM. Now keep in mind, during this same time period, you still had the standard Night Rod, in addition to that Night Rod Special. Had a little bit less horsepower at 120 and 80 foot-pounds of torque. Now you also had, in 2007, another variant called the Street Rod. This bike, again, has the 120 horsepower, but it has a different look and a little bit different height to it. The bigger seat height gave you a 40-degree lean angle compared to the 32 degrees that was standard in the lineup at the time. And let's not forget the base model V-Rod, just the plain V-Rod, had 115 horsepower and 74 pound-feet of torque. It still kept the wide tire on the back. 2008 saw the continuation of the Night Rod Special with the 125 horsepower and 85 pound-feet of torque, the slipper clutch, and the anti-lock braking system as an option. We will see in 2008 that they increase the horsepower on the base V-Rod for the first time in a while, up to 121 horsepower and 84 foot-pounds of torque. We gain another bike in 2008, another anniversary bike, the 105th anniversary to be exact. This was a really cool looking bike. I enjoy this model quite a bit. 121 horsepower and 84 foot-pounds of torque with all the electronic upgrades that they have been using for the last few years. The Night Rod in 2008 got electric sequential port fuel injection, which really aided the performance of the bike and the delivery of the power. You're at 125 horsepower and 85 foot-pounds of torque, 5-speed transmission, and the rear wheel was driven by a carbon fiber final belt drive. 2009, the VRS-CAW, same engine, 121 horsepower, 84 foot-pounds of torque. You're seeing this ESPF fuel injection system being a standard now. Just a really solid, reliable bike. 2009 saw the introduction of the new V-Rod muscle. Some unique things on here is exhaust on both sides. Turn signals are built into the mirrors on it. It's got that straight shot exhaust system. The bike also had a chopper style rear fender with integrated turn signals and a side mounted license plate holder. The engine put out 122 horsepower and 86 foot-pounds of torque. The king of them all at this time was still the Night Rod Special with 125 horsepower and 85 foot-pounds of torque. V-Rod Muscle again came out, had some very unique color options, just a little bit less horsepower than the Night Rod. We can get some cool colors on the Night Rod Special in 2011, but nothing really changed other than that. Now for 2012, that Night Rod Special ended up with a different wheel, flush-mounted taillights, and a pulled-back handlebar to bring the controls closer to the rider. In 2012, the Muscle got adjustable shock absorbers with preload in the rear to give better handling and performance. In the final years, in 2016, the Night Rod Special, with the exception of some changes in color, really didn't have any performance changes. And the same was true for the V-Rod Muscle in the final 2 years. So the question is, in the end, should I wait for this bike? Or if I want a muscle bike, should I build my own? Okay, so my thoughts. You could probably tell, and I will admit, that I'm a little biased toward the Fat Bob. My biggest regret in all of my doings with motorcycles is letting my Fat Bob go. I don't regret buying Jade Shadow. She's been amazing, and I definitely needed her at the time, and I couldn't have two bikes at that time, but I miss the Fat Bob. So here's my thoughts. If they come out with the V-Rod by next summer, I'm going to give myself till next summer, then I'm going to take a look at that very seriously as a possible next bike. I want to get something that's more of a canyon carver, being up here in the mountains, and I just want to have some fun. But I'm not going to give up Jade Shadow, so don't think that at all. Okay, so if they don't come out with the V-Rod, or it doesn't meet my expectations, and what my plan is to get another Fat Bob, and we're going to do an ultimate build out. We are going to make it an untouchable muscle bike. I'd love to have you along for that journey as well. And we're going to continue to make content. I do have another video coming up that's going to talk all about my plans and goals with this channel and with others. And I'm looking forward to sharing that with you when that time comes. So thank you for watching. I really do appreciate you. I really enjoy being able to share these things with you. And I'll see you on the next video.